Welcome back to Raid Guides in a Trenchcoat featuring the Root of Nightmares, Plants vs. Zombies, Traveler to the Pyramids DLC. There are unfathomable quantities of questions that get routinely posted to the internet. How do I change a tire? When does the next season of come out? Does switching to Geico really save you 15% or more on car insurance? Google.com? And what is in the Pyramid Ships Destiny 2 2024? Though I suppose it would be more accurate to postmark that as 2022 because in March of 2023, the world was given its answer in the form of Root of Nightmares. And that answer is a Plants vs. Zombies gardening simulator that had a record high contest mode completion rate and a community response that was about on the same level as that of Garden Warfare 2. It's also a Cabal raid, and if you had asked me which enemy race would be spearheading a raid about growing things, I think the Cabal would have been at the bottom of my list unless the things being grown were lists of Geneva Convention violations. Bungie also kept up with their read symbols early red border chest mechanic, which was honestly an ingenious way to get players to do more than just the final boss from week to week. But if you've already got all those crafting patterns, what you get instead when you first load in is a fun little skating playground that only hunters get to utilize and some weird white tendrils to climb up into the first encounter. Cataclysm is everyone's favorite all ad clear encounter where all you need is one person who minimally understands the mechanic and another player who is active during the Leviathan raid's lifespan. The whole point of the encounter is to play telephone operator between these big Orid light balls and these tiny paracausal seedlings across 4 different area codes. To clock in and start your day, shoot or punch the node, and then anyone within the hazy small batch IPA will be granted the Cummy buff. The runner then needs to use that buff to fertilize the little plant that happens to be ovulating, which will have the runner looking around like that one SpongeBob meme. The Cummy buff, however, and don't worry that's the last time I call it that, runs on an AM radio frequency, which is to say that if another player starts throwing tinfoil balls at it before the runner establishes a connection, then it'll go something like... And these are white balls, not blue. The runner will start at one node, find the seedling it activated, and then find where the next white aura is to grab the buff and find the next seedling after that. This will continue until all of the seedlings are activated, ending on one of these little flower petal looking things which pauses the timer temporarily. Meanwhile, the other 5 players get to split the other singular mechanic, which is the timer counting down to an imminent wipe. Somewhere in the active part of the arena, a Scion and a Pal Sphere will appear and you'll have to beat it to death as capitalism demands. With the Scion down, a Tormentor will spawn, and we all know how bad the general Destiny populace is at killing those. But successfully killing it will extend the timer. There's 4 paths in all, and the hardest part of the encounter is deciding who you're going to blame when you all forget to focus down or even spawn the Tormentor. Follow the not yellow, not brick, white root roads to get to the second encounter, but not before you first encounter this janky contraption of architects invoking technology, which you'll want to spend the time mastering now because it'll be super important for the second encounter. Welcome to Shatter, Bubble, Well Skating, the Encounter. I recognize the time and effort that the Council of Bungie put into these aviation law-defying catapults, but given that it's a silly-ass amount of time and effort, I've elected to ignore it, because this encounter was made for skating. I mean, look at all these ledges. Scission introduces the second radio frequency of the raid, so now not only do you have AM, but you also have FM. This is functionally equivalent to the other color, except for use with the orange mechanics. This encounter also introduces the light and dark shields, which must be broken by somebody with the appropriate buff, which is all good and fun until you realize how little time the runners have, which means that somebody else will have to be taking the buffs as well, without leaving the radio tower and evoking some egregious interference. If a runner ever activates their node while someone outside of it has the buff, the entire network will blue screen and you'll have to wait for the BIOS to remember that it has a boot disk again. So, once again, 4 people are just on ad clear while the last 2 players compete to finish their half of the relay race first in hopes that neither takes long enough that the bouncer ejects your drunk asses out of the bar. Now, it shouldn't be a race, especially for the last bit because it wouldn't be a Cabal raid without some soft locking jank, but don't try and kid yourself. It absolutely is a race, and I am going to win it. Unlike the randomized pattern of the previous encounter and all future encounters, you can take solace in knowing that this encounter always follows the same sequence, no matter which side you're on. Shoot, cross, shoot far, cross, shoot, shoot near, shoot, cross, shoot far, cross and forget to cancel your shatter dives so that you end up eating a res token. Welcome to Raid Skills with Raid Guides in a Trenchcoat. To Shatter Skate, open up your subclass menu and switch to Stasis and Shatter Dive. If you don't see Shatter Dive, exit to the character selection screen, delete your warlock, make a hunter, and complete the Beyond Light campaign. Reopen your menu, find your heavy attack to 4, jump to 5, and air move to 6. Equip your Eager Edge sword, press 1, walk up to a ledge, press 3, and then roll your fingers across the 4, 5, and 6 keys in sequence as fast as you can. This has been Raid Skills with Raid Guides in a Trenchcoat. You'll have to learn how to break on your own. Unironically, this is a great place to learn to skate between the rally flag spot and all of the ledges. You can even play Guardian Bowling by standing someone on the prism and trying to skate yourself into them. Shame there's no way to wish while your way to get here alone. Anyways, I'm getting very sidetracked. Once you've completed both the light and dark chains, kill some ads and then huddle up with your half of the team into the catapults to fling yourself up to level 2, where you'll follow the exact same pattern as you'll do once again on level 3. Kill the ads, open the path forward, and then stand uncomfortably close to the butthole, and wait for someone else smarter to deal with the nodes here. With that, you'll reach. Long-standing watchers of this series will understand that when a jumping puzzle gets its own music, it's because I'm about to go off on how bullshit a mechanic is. And yeah, you're right. Because somebody decided to teach a major raid mechanic that you'll need for the rest of the raid during a jumping puzzle that punishes you for being bad at it and actively tries to prevent you from helping out your buddies who are struggling. That's because this Traptanium crystal sends out an EMP pulse every 15 some odd seconds that unsubscribes you from the subscription that is life unless you build a very convoluted tinfoil hat of refuge. To craft this Crown of Defiance, you must first enter into a light node and shoot it. If you're the designated ad clearer, odds are the negative reinforcement is set in after you've been yelled at for wandering too close to the mechanics in the previous encounters, but believe me, it's really okay. You can shoot these ones. This time. Once you've picked up the light buff, hunt around for a dark node, preferably one further along in the path. Shooting a dark node will then fuse your buffs into a new one called Darkness Refuge, which protects you from all darkness EMPs. That'll be an important distinction later. So all of that is how this is supposed to work, but some of these nodes are just far enough away from one another that if you happen to slip up and miss a jump somewhere, or take too long getting through these Shadow Legion fodder, the buff will run out and you won't be able to reapply your sunscreen before the suspiciously well-timed pulse of solar particles strikes your Nintendo 64. There's a midpoint here where you'll have to all gather to unlock the second half, and then there's this horrible stretch at the end that you'll get very acquainted with while you wait for your, less than capable fire team members. Or you can just hide in this little alcove here until everyone is ready to group up and unlock the door to the third encounter. But we'd never cheese mechanics like that. Explicator will see you throwing whole ass planets around in the cutscene room from the end of the Witch Queen campaign. In a stunning yet bold departure from the first half of the raid, ad clearers can hang up their sanitation worker aprons and partake in not only a damage phase featuring a real boss with a real health bar, but a whopping 4 people get to participate in the mechanics this time, which is practically Shuro Chi. Alright, so in terms of callouts, this is, I guess, the only Root of Nightmares encounter that has them. The only problem is that LFG commonly uses numbers and makes the mistake of doubling said numbers up, which is fine if you listen for the range your callouts sit in and everyone hears correctly the first time, but all of those being true is about as likely as Jax passing up an opportunity to yell at you for not throwing enough grenades. People will mishear, ask for clarification, and suddenly everyone is asking two, in an increasingly exacerbated bid to figure out if they're asking you to or telling you to. I say, get rid of the numbers altogether. The platforms are triangles. And what are triangles made out of? ASA congruence proofs. Oh, and also more triangles. We all know that math teacher Triforce looking thing. And what else is a large collection of triangles? Pizza. So let's get some pizza topping callouts going, starting first with some categories. On the left, we have the nearby meat plate and the far sauce plate, while the right has the near vegetable plate and the far cheese plate. If I could spell charcuterie, I would have chosen that. Each plate has 3 interactable planet nodes and each one has a different name. From the front of the room to the back of the room, and yes, I know how divisive that is, the meat plate is ham, sausage, pepperoni. The sauce plate is pesto, alfredo, marinara. The vegetable plate is jalapeno, peppers, spinach. And lastly, the cheese plate is Parmesan, mozzarella, and Asiago. Now with that out of the way, the mechanics hinge on killing these 2 solar-shielded Centurions to spawn the 4 big Colossi and obtain the planetary insight buff, allowing up to 4 people to see how many of the planets are hot with pulsing fire and how many are frigid with glistening ice. In reality, one planet will not be like the others, and that is the planet that someone must pick up. But like my patience with trials, you can't hold on to a planet forever. You must put it down where someone on the opposite side of the arena had picked one up. Hence, the back and forth callouts. But anyone can pick up a planet, even if you didn't kill a Colossus, so instead of all trying to shout over one another, you can have a player on each side expedite the line for Explicator and call out the witness's pizza order while watching everyone else scramble. Yeah, the witness wants a pesto-based Asiago, slap some ham and peppers on it. Now, nobody does this encounter this way, but all I'm saying is that you could. Again, more realistically, you'll all shout over each other, and if someone fucks up, well, at least you'll get a backup chance. With all the planets picked up and placed, you'll then get a pre-damage phase where 3 of the planets above Explicator will either gain hot or cold attunements. Each of those 3 will need to be swapped to the planet from the outside, so if you're on sauce or meat, you'll cover any hot planets that appear, and veggies and cheese will deal with the cold planets. And there's always going to be at least one of the 4 plates people who doesn't have to drag a planet in, but only one. The damage phase then consists of tagging alternating plates. Start on one of the plates that you have 2 of and hope that you all pick the same one, because otherwise you'll burn them both and shorten your burst window. After firing 3 rockets, 1 will connect with the boss, 1 will connect with the wall, and the 3rd will hit that pesky immune shield, signaling it's time to soak the buff of the 2nd plate. The damage phase continues until the 3rd buff is exhausted, or until you hit the final stand. In Final Stand, return to form. You'll soak buffs, deal damage, and provided you have the bare minimum of ammo finders on, you'll crush him no problem. Nab your loot and then make your way through this MC Escher door selection simulator that I dare not spoil the Scooby-Doo fun factor of. You'll stand next to another butthole, and then end up right back where the raid started. Nezarec has freed himself from his Traptanium crystal, and now it's time to crush this guy back down to a pulp of tea once again. I don't know how many of you have been reading all the Osiris x Saint 14 fanfiction, but someone is thirsty. Speaking of thirsty, let's start by entering the Starbucks simulator segment of this encounter. Instead of dark and light, am or fm, hot or cold, think of it as coffee and creamer. Nezarec will start by frisking down all of the employees with his purple psionic gaze in search of a manager because he doesn't believe that any of you have what it takes to craft his woefully uninspired coffee drink. Sniping his shoulders will end his frisking, after which he'll make the order, chase you down, and you'll have to fill it before the customer goes nuclear. Some people prefer a dash of creamer in their coffee, denoted by an orange burst of energy, and some heathens prefer a cup of full cream with 3 minuscule drops of coffee, denoted by a white burst. To fulfill these orders, grab a dash of one ingredient while your encounter standard runners get their buffs, and then take it to an opposite node like in the jumping not so puzzle to create either a dark refuge on a dark node or a light refuge on a light node. Additionally, with the shoulders broken, someone is going to need to babysit him by shooting him in the chest repeatedly so that Nezarec doesn't try jumping behind the bar to make the drink himself. As far as everyone else is concerned, we're back down to 2 runners that dip and dodge between the active nodes and seedlings, and a combination of first encounters RNG and second encounters relay race for an RNG relay race that gets interrupted by mandatory out-of-the-way refuge checkpoints. Because here's the secret of food service: nobody is ever happy with their order. Nezarec is going to go nuclear no matter what your barista does, and the only way to avoid getting fired from life is to show your boss that you did exactly what Nezarec ordered, thereby shifting the blame onto him. Make the appropriate refuge and pick up the buff by running through the more radiant looking puddle beneath the appropriate node. Just remember that it has a timer, so if you tag the checkpoint too early and go back to running, Nezarec is going to wait until right after your buff runs out to throw his tantrum. Get ready to snipe his shoulders again, and then make sure your runners fertilize all of the nodes on their way to the final flower platforms. For damage, group up on this plate, or this plate, or this plate, and similarly disagree on if linears, rockets, or flinging him to high hell with Thunderlord is the damage avenue you'd like to explore. Nezarec will yell his dragon shout for Destiny 2's equivalent of Lumos, and thus the damage will begin. He'll jump up, teleport around, and overall just be a pain in the ass to hit unless you can somehow corral all of your fire team to the far back of a platform and train them not to strafe in front of your rockets. Deal what damage you can and get ready for another running phase. If you manage to get your first damage phase without needing to step into a refuge, don't worry because Nezarec doesn't make that mistake the second time around. Do more damage to get a final stand. Final stand will have him shouting more, baiting your final rocket into his immune phase before forcing you to primary him down to 0. Take his health bar, snap it over your knee, and then, congrats! You've completed the Root of Nightmares. The raid exotic here is basically just the Hive God Katy Perry turned into a gun because it's hot, and it's cold.
Guardian down.
Go watch a real guide.